welcome back to my channel. If you are new, subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, hit that notification button. And I just wasted 3 hours of my life trying to get the Shane Dawson palette, the Conspiracy palette. I decided to step out of my comfort zone and wear something besides Mary Kay because Mary Kay makes my skin look great. And I wanted to get something that had dramatic colors and try to mess around with it a little bit. But I waited 3 hours on that wonky site, and I know I'm an idiot for doing that to begin with, but when I finally did get in, it told me it was sold out 3 hours later, and it kicked me out of the site. I was one of the first people in there. I was signed in. I was actually signed in on 2 different accounts, and I just did not get it. So, you know what? I will never, ever, ever buy any kind of makeup at launch. I will wait until the restock. That is a valuable lesson I learned, but let's get on with this book so we can finish it up. There's only 4 chapters left. And there's quite a bit in this chapter, which is chapter 24, the arrest and plea and sentencing. Now, the agents asked Christopher if the police officers could take a photograph of him without his shirt on. They wanted to see if he had any injuries. So he agreed, and they photographed his face, his head, his arms, his chest, his back, his hands, and legs. Following the interview, they took him in custody. They put him in a belly belt, and what that is, it's where you're handcuffed and shackled to your feet. So it's another form of security for the person being arrested. And then they escorted him to the police SUV, and they drove him to the Weld County facility to be put in jail. And then on the way, the officer said that Chris didn't say one word to him and that he didn't say a word to him either. And about 3 a.m., they released him to the Weld County Jail. And between the time of his arrest and sentencing, they're saying things happened at the house that would make somebody think that it was a little creepy. And that evil can present itself in many forms. And that strange things one evening, long after the murders, were happening. And the author says these things happened on different nights, but if you go back to the discovery, you can see that all these things happened on the same day. And that the discovery version is just a little bit different than the author's version. And so she's saying that the police were called because one of the neighbors had seen a woman walking around in the garage. And that we've all seen that video footage where the 4 police officers come to the Watts house and you can see the garage lights are on. But when they went inside, they yelled, "Make yourself known," like they do. And that there was no answer. So they went into the garage. They did have their guns out. And when they opened the garage door, however, the lights were off. And so they searched the house and no one was there. But there was no way out of the garage either. The person would have had to come past them or lift open the garage door. And the author said that it was obvious on the police cam video that they felt something too, but I'm not sure about that. And then she asked who turned the lights on and who turned the lights off. Now, on another evening at 9:05, even though we know this was the same day, the police called the house, or the police were called to the house because an unknown person was seen going up to the house. And when they got there, the neighbor had told them that he had caught it on foot. I can't talk today. That he had captured it on footage. And so I would love to see that footage. I haven't ever seen it. If you guys know where that is, please give us a link down below because I would love to see that footage. And I feel like that if there was footage of that, why are they holding it back? And so on the footage, it says that the neighbor's video pointed towards the Watts home and that it showed a large black SUV pulling up. And as it pulled up, a unknown woman stepped out of the vehicle and walked up to the door of the Watts home. And the police said that the woman could not be seen leaving and that the garage lights came on and had been off. The police entered the house again and gave their announcements, and no one was there. So they searched the house again and found no one. They turned off all the lights that were on and locked the doors as they left. And she said on September 21st, the police received a message from an unknown person saying that her deceased daughter's back door was open. And this was the house of Shanann Watts. And so the police walked the perimeter. They saw no signs of forced entry. They seen everything was secure. And so at 8:50, they got another call that the lights were on again and they had been off. And so the police officers responded. They searched again. There were lights on, but they did not see anything was bothered. So they turned those lights off again and they left, making sure that the doors were locked. And the author says that research shows that demons like to play with lights and electrical things, and that his mom was on a quest at that moment to find out what really happened. And this is where the Watts family feels the judicial system is difficult for them to deal with. And that his family was not allowed to see or talk to him until the day before sentencing. And that they were told that he pled guilty to murdering his entire family. And that is, they feel, the Watts family feels like the attorneys did not make him plead guilty, but they do feel like they strongly advised it because it was the only thing they could do to save his life. And so Chris says he has a hard time with the plea deal, but he did not want the death penalty. And his family was not told any details. And so they feel like they should have been told details before Chris pled guilty. And he did tell his family at sentencing that he pled guilty to the murders for a reason. So when they went in and they read their, what are they called? The victims, you guys will know in the comments. When they read that and Cindy read that out loud, she still hadn't been given any details from what the author is saying. And so she didn't know exactly what Chris had done. And in her mind, she was still thinking that he was taking the rap and blah, blah, blah. So then the author lets you know that the state of Colorado gives automatically a life sentence to someone who murders another individual. And that the DA wanted the death penalty, and they would have given Chris the death penalty if Shanann's mom had not begged for them not to. And we all think he probably would have gotten it too, right? And the author says that this may show that Sandy loved her son-in-law more than Chris realized, and she commended Sandy for it, saying that it was very difficult. And she says that Chris told her that if they had not arrested him when they did, that he had decided to plead guilty anyway. And he said once he got past his anger and memory loss, that in his own words, he said that he was going to plead guilty. And that the morning of the murders did not happen because he was in a blind rage. He says he might have been angry for sure, but the anger was building up for weeks, and some of it for years. And he started to plan these killings, and he admits himself that once he started planning them, he was not able to just stop, and that he had become obsessed with them. Christopher said had they not gotten the evidence to arrest him, that he did plan on confessing, that he couldn't remember everything to tell them, and that it was hard for him because at that time he did not feel remorse and he had to pretend like he had remorse. And he does not like for people to hate him. He even apologized to the agents in the interrogation because he lied, but then he continued to lie, right? And the attorneys kept telling him and told his family that they were just trying to save his life. And after the arrest, he told his attorneys what he could remember, and that they were willing to tell whatever Chris wanted them to tell. And so he said that they had some very angry and very stressful times during the case, going over it and what his options were. And he said that he felt heartless and angry and defiant all the way up until October 1st when it all broke from him. And this is his plea, okay? I want to read this to you. One, he says he is the defendant of the case. He says that he has had enough time to talk to his lawyers and that they have discussed evidence against him, and they have fully explained his side to him. And it says that he believes the district attorney has enough evidence to convict him at trial. And it says that Chris is satisfied with the plea deal and it is in his best interest. It says that Chris understands his right to exercise all of his rights, even against his own lawyer's advice, and that Chris has the right to remain silent. He also understands that he has the right to have his lawyer present and to represent him during any conferences or questioning by anyone and at all hearings and trials. He says he understands he has the right to not plead not guilty and have a jury trial. He says he understands he has the right to appeal his case to the highest court if convicted at trial. He also says he understands his right to a jury trial includes the right to help select the jury, the right to help confront witnesses that testify against him, and to have his lawyer cross-examine them about their testimonies. He understands his right to be presumed innocent until the district attorney proves him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And he understands his right to have his lawyer call witnesses to testify for him. And he understands that he has the right to have the judge order the witnesses to come to court. And Chris understands that he has read his charges that he is pleading guilty to. And he has read and understands his possible penalties that he could be sentenced to. And his plea is freely and intelligently and voluntarily given. And he says that he knows that he is giving up all the rights described above. And he understands his rights. And that Chris is giving up these rights and pleading guilty on his own free will. No one has pressured him or tried to make him plead guilty against his will. And Chris has not decided to plead guilty because of anything he has been told, except for the agreements in this attached paper. And he understands that the record may be further supplemented by police reports, affidavits, and documentation. And he understands that the sentencing in this matter, he understands that he has the right to an appellate review of the conviction and sentence. And a notice of appeal must be filed within 7 weeks or 49 days of the sentencing. He understands that if he is determined indigent by the court, that he has a right to assistance of an appointed counsel upon the review of conviction, and the right to obtain a record on appeal without payment or cost. Additionally, he understands he may have the right to seek conviction reduction, and that would be of his sentence in the trial court within 18 weeks or 126 days of the imposition of sentencing. And he says he read his form and he understands it, and his lawyer has answered all his questions to his satisfaction. And then it says that the defendant, Chris Watts, on November 15th, 2018, that he represented and reviewed the advisement with the defendant, and that he believes he understands his rights and his charges that he's pleading guilty to and the possible penalties. And his lawyer also believes that the defendant pled guilty freely, intelligently, and voluntarily. And then these are all of Chris's charges. He was charged with 9 counts. Count 1, murder in the first degree after deliberation, Shanann Watts, Class 1 felony. Count 2, murder in the first degree after deliberation, Bella Watts, Class 1 felony. Count 3, murder in the first degree after deliberation, Celeste Watts, a Class 1 felony. Count 4, murder in the first degree, child under 12, Bella Watts, Class 1 felony. Count 5, murder in the first degree, child under 12, Celeste Watts, a Class 1 felony. Count 6, unlawful termination of a pregnancy in the first degree, Nico, Class 2 felony. Count 7, tampering with the deceased body, a Class 3 felony. Count 8, tampering with a deceased body, Class 3 felony. Count 9, tampering with a deceased human body, Class 3 felony. So in exchange for his guilty plea, the district attorneys will not seek the death penalty. And with the exception that at a minimum, counts 1 through 3 and count 6 run consecutively. So they want these life sentences one right after another, not concurrent, meaning running at the same time. And that each charge, the reason why they're asking for this is because each charge is a separate victim. And so they said that the parties further stipulates that the defendant will pay restitution as determined by the court, including expenses for all the funerals and the burials. And furthermore, the defendant agrees to pay restitution covering the actual cost of specific future treatment pursuant to CRS. If you guys know what CRS means, please let us know. And finally, the parties stipulate that the people may withdraw from this agreement if the defendant commits a new felony offense while awaiting sentencing. So if he would have gotten in trouble with a felony in prison, maybe gotten in a fight and hurt somebody really bad, then they could have taken all this back from what I'm reading. So then it just goes into each count into detail, and we do not need to do that. We know what all of those counts mean. And so the sentencing, Christopher hadn't thought very far ahead when he offered his plea deal to the DA. He said his head was all mixed up and he was living in a fog and he couldn't make sense of anything. And when his attorneys came up with asking for the plea, Christopher was angry about that. He did not like that. He told him that they told him in return that they were trying to save his life. And that had he not pled guilty, he would probably get the death sentence. And of course, attorneys would go whichever way that Chris wanted. And Chris said that he offered the plea agreement to the DA and the DA was shocked by it. He said he'd never seen it coming. And so on count 1, which was murder in the first degree of Shanann Watts, Chris got life in prison without the possibility of parole. And then on count 2, murder in the first degree, Bella Watts, he got life in prison without the possibility of parole. And on count 3, murder in the first degree, Celeste Watts, he got life in prison without the possibility of parole. And count 4, murder in the first degree of a child under 12. Again, life in prison without possibility of parole. And then on his count 5, which was murder of a child under 12, Celeste Watts, he got life in prison without the possibility of parole. And I find this very sad that for the unlawful termination of pregnancy, it's only a class 2 felony. And he only got 46 years for killing Nico. And then tampering with the deceased human body, he only got 12 years for Shanann Watts. And that is only a class 3 felony. And tampering with a deceased body for Bella, he got 12 years, and it's a class 3 felony. And tampering with a deceased human body for Celeste Watts, Chris received 12 years, and it is a class 3 felony. And at the end of this chapter, she does say that the judge said out of his 17 years that this was the worst and most brutal case he had ever presided over. And that he gave Chris the maximum that the law would allow him to give Chris without putting him to death. So there you have it. Thank you guys again for all my subscribers. Continue to watch, join my giveaway, and hopefully I will be back with another video tonight. Thank you.